Imagine you got everything you ever wanted: money, prestige, fame, but it came at a steep cost: 100-hour work weeks. Would you do it? Even if it was months on end? Would you push through? And if you did, would you know when to stop, or would your body force you?
But the thing that finally broke through my my veil of ignorance was when my body collapsed. I'd been pushing really hard to get through the end of the year. I made it to Christmas Day, and I woke up with 103-degree fever. And so I went in, I talked to my manager. I'm like, yeah, I'm not doing this anymore. Not going to work that hard. They looked at me like an alien. The whole idea of you have a choice came in that week to me. What if I said no to more work? What if I said no to the promotion?
Hey, I'm Devon Coombs, CPA, MBA, and I lead multi-billion-dollar negotiations and financial advice for Google Cloud. But for fun, I also do this podcast, Ambition Aligned, where we take on high-performance, high-potential individuals who made career decisions based on values rather than based on money. And so today, my guest exemplifies that. Eric was chief of staff for some of the top leaders at Google, had a great salary, secure job, but decided to leave that all behind to pursue a more meaningful career in executive coaching and being an author for his book, You Have a Choice, which I've read myself and I have to say is excellent. I think we all can learn a lot today from him. It's extremely valuable lesson on making value-based decisions for your life so you're heading the right direction. You've had some moments in your career that look wildly successful on paper, yet internally you felt like something was off. Something was maybe breaking. Can you take us back to one of those moments? What did it feel like? And when did you realize that something had to change?
So it is one of the kind of different from the inside and outside. On the outside, I'm in this position where I'm meeting with the VPs of Google regularly. I'm leading the discussions about their business strategy, reviewing their, taking responsibility for the budget, for the revenue projections. I'm in all the rooms where it matters. And I'm also working 100 hours a week. And I've been doing that for almost 3 years now. And I have not done anything outside of work for those years because that's a lot of time to be spending at work. And I felt okay with it. It's like, well, this is an opportunity. You don't get these kind of opportunities to work with top Google leaders very often. I just have to make the most of it while I can. And I was also at the time gunning for a promotion at Google and wanted to really prove I belong there, really prove that they hadn't made a mistake in hiring me, that I could really play at the big time level. And so my manager was telling me, hey, if you want that promotion, you got to show more, do more, take this on, take that on. I'm like, yes, I will take it all on because I want that promotion. So, promotion track, lots of exposure, top prestigious company, everything looked great, except for the fact that I was completely exhausted. And I kept on pushing through. I kept on pulling the late nights. I was regularly working till midnight every night. And I was like, oh, that's fine. That's just what it takes. That's what it takes to succeed. So the thing that kind of made me realize, well, there are lots of signs that I should have changed. I didn't listen to them. Like my friends were like, you're a workaholic. We never see you anymore. I'm like, yeah, but it's an important job. I got to do it. Or at one point I was trying to date at the time. And this girl that I liked was like, yeah, I really like you, but I don't see you because you're always working. Like, yeah, but well, you don't understand. It's a really important job. I whatever. And so that didn't work out. But the thing that finally broke through my my veil of ignorance was when my body collapsed. I was like, I'd been pushing really hard to get through the end of the year. I made it to Christmas Day, and I woke up with 103-degree fever. I was basically sick in bed for a week. All my plans for the holidays evaporated because I was just too sick to do anything. And I was like, well, that was kind of the moment that's like, what am I doing? What, this is real. This is serious. And because I'm not the kind of person that typically gets sick. And for me, my body to collapse like that meant I was way, way, way past the red line. So that's kind of the moment of reckoning for me of, is this really what I want to do?
Yeah, and what I'm hearing, let me recap that is, and I'm sorry you had to go through all of that, and I appreciate you sharing it. What I'm hearing though is your mind was so powerful. You're such in a high performance mindset that your body had to be the thing that shut down before your mind caught up to your body, right? Is that right?
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. I mean, that's something that people, high performers, take pride in, like mind over matter. I can push harder. I can work harder. I can overcome anything if I just am strong enough, if I have enough willpower. And like this is a characteristic that carried me to a lot of success. When I was in college, there was a time when I pushed through and did like 2 semester-long projects in a week because like I needed to, and I slept 2 hours a night and I pushed through and I made it happen. And everybody was like, "You're amazing. That's awesome." It was a point of pride, not a point of like embarrassment that I procrastinated enough that I needed to do it all in the last week. And that's something that I'd kind of grown proud of and saw as a core part of my identity. Is I would just push through, make things happen no matter what. And yeah, it's a great trait until it isn't.
What I think is so fascinating from that is, well, and I relate so much to, right? I was chief of staff at my org at Google, and I know what it's like to work those 100-hour weeks. And it's easy to say that, but when you do that for years on end, the toll stress takes on your body is just enormous, and people don't recognize it. People say, hey, if you have more stress, you'll die 20 years younger, but you don't realize the toll on it until you're living it. And so I guess my question to you would be, how do you go from a place of driven performance like that to being confident in making a choice, similar to your book, having the choice to make something completely different, become an author, an executive coach, and live a life of freedom where you can reclaim your health and still have that high performance identity? How did you do that?
I mean, it started that week in bed because that was the moment where I first realized I had a choice. Before that, I was like, I don't have a choice. I have to work these hours. I have to do everything my manager asks of me. I have to earn that promotion. There was no choices there. It was all I have to. I must. I can't say no. If they need something with me, I have to say yes. Yeah. All those years of 100-hour weeks. It had never occurred to me like, oh, I don't have to do this. But for some reason, I was so burned out. I was so exhausted. I was so tired that I was like, what would happen if I said no to some of these things? And I was tired enough and I was done enough that I was ready to say, yeah, like, okay, maybe they'll just fire me on the spot if I say no. And I would be okay living with that consequence. They're like, what do you mean? Like I can't do it. It's too much. Like, well, if you can't handle the work, we're going to find somebody that can. I'm like, I understand. If you can't handle the work, that means your promotion's not happening. Like, that is what it means. And so they took away half my team. They slashed my performance rating. And the world didn't end. And that was the moment of reckoning for me. I'm like, oh, I had always lived in terror of not delivering on above expectations. And now I said no to the expectations, and yeah, there were consequences, but the world didn't end. And I have there are possibilities now that I didn't have before. And it was just this moment of realizing, oh, I can make different choices if I am willing to accept the consequences of those choices. And I think that's the part people miss. A lot of people miss when they first hear about the book. They're like, you have a choice. They're like, yeah, but what's the right choice? How do I get everything that I want? I'm like, sometimes you can't, but you can still choose what from the options available. You can still choose and live with the consequences of those actions. And in my case, I didn't get the promotion. I didn't get, the upward trajectory I wanted, but I did get my life back. I did get time to pursue hobbies and see my friends and see my family again. And I decided that was more important to me than getting that promotion. That was the choice I made. And that choice, that was, almost 15 years ago now. That's reverberated since then. Because once I realized I had choices, I started exploring. I started experimenting. I'm like, what if I did this? What if I did that? What if I tried this other thing that I never thought I could do? And each one opened up more possibilities for me. So here I am,
No, go ahead. Go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
So at that time that I, had this mini epiphany, had been single my whole life. Now I'm married with 3 kids. At the time, I was like, thought I'd reached the height of what I ever would. I wasn't getting that promotion, and it was only after that that I became the chief of staff and led the search ads team, business strategy and operations team at Google for 6 years. And then I became an executive coach, and then I wrote a book, and now I offer a bunch of other services. All that stuff was stuff I created later in life, in my 40s. Like people are like, oh, you think about, oh, the trajectory of life is set by the time you're like 25 or something. Like, no, I changed things in my life in an unrecognizable way in my 40s. And part of the reason I wrote the book, part of the reason I do these podcasts, part of the reason I talk about this stuff is I just want people to know it's never too late. You can always make a choice. You can always start changing your life today. Can't change the past. There's that Chinese proverb, the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago, and the next best time is now. And so I want people to think that way. Like, now is the time. If you've been thinking about a change, try it. Try something. Do something. So that's the message I want people to take away.
That's a great message. I'm curious, zooming into that moment where you went to your boss and you had this health scare and you went to your boss and said, I'm not going to do this anymore. I feel like that you mentioned that as one part of the story, but there's a betting on yourself in that moment, and that there's a immense courage to do something very different than you've been doing your whole life. Could you elaborate a little more on what that was like, or how did you muster up the courage, if you will?
I wouldn't say it was courage. It was more exhaustion. It was just like, please put me out of my misery. Like, if they had fired me in that moment, I would have been happy because then I would have been able to stop working. And so it's like that the worst case outcome in some case was the best case outcome. If I had been fired, then I would have had a chance to recover. I would have been a chance to recharge, relax. And I mean, in some ways that wasn't what happened. But that was kind of like I had kind of thought about, like, that would be the worst case outcome, and I was okay with that. And if you're okay with the worst case outcome, it doesn't take much courage to do it, because it's like, okay, whatever happens, I'm okay with it. And that's kind of a sign I've learned, and since then, that you're living in alignment with your values and with your integrity, that this is how I want to live, and I'll accept the consequences, because no matter how it turns out, this is the way I choose to be. So it's something I often talk about with my coaching clients of like, they're like, well, what's the right thing to do here? I'm like, I don't know. But I know there's one way that's going to feel like your way of integrity. That's going to be in alignment with your values. And that's the one that, like, you don't care how it turns out, because no matter what happens, you'll be okay with it because you lived the way you meant to live.
So in that moment, what I'm hearing is, in that moment, it was health and family and friends or promotion path. And clearly your values were my health and my family and friends are more important. And then that reverberated to being much more success than you could have probably ever imagined at that point. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. I had no idea that I would have much greater success just a couple of years down the road. And and then I would someday have a family of my own. Like, that was unimaginable in that moment. And yet here we are.
So what do you do then since you're an executive coach, and I know you've coached many executives, this is not uncommon, right? Most executives or most high performers, chief of staff, anyone in those realms, I get the sense, and I've been told, it feels like running on a treadmill, and the speed just keeps going up. The higher up you go, you always think the next level is going to be the one that you got to take a break and delegate. Doesn't happen. The 100 hours become 100 hours, then flights in between, right? Do you have any indicators that you see in people that can help you pick up on someone who's heading towards burnout?
I mean, the exhaustion, obviously, the working too hard, the I'm so busy. These are all indicators. And this, I think the main shift I invite a lot of my clients into is learning that delegation move, of learning they don't have to do it all themselves. And so that's going to be like the one of the key indicators. It's like, they're so busy, they're overloaded, and yet they're not willing to give anything up. It's like, yeah, no, you can't choose both those paths. It's not going to work. And they're like, well, but but how do I give up anything? This is all important. Like, some of it's more important and some of it's more valuable. And for you to get clear on what's most important, that's what's going to let you, progress in your career. Because your time has to be treated as the most valuable resource. And that's the thing that people miss. Like, and I mean, it's very common. It's like, it's like, oh, my time isn't worth anything. I can just do, I'll do it all. I had the same mistake. I made the same mistake. I was like, oh, I'll just take on more and I'll just do everything. If I can do it, I should do it. Like, that was the bar. It's like, if I can do it, like, and as you get more senior in your careers, your time gets more valuable. That's no longer a high enough bar. Is it the most valuable thing I could be doing with my time? The opportunity cost of our time and energy becomes a key criteria to consider. And so that's something I work with a lot of my clients. Like, yeah, you could do this, but somebody else could do it too. And they might not do it as well, and they might not do it as fast. But if you can spend an hour coaching them to do it, and they go off and do 40 hours of work, that's a much better use of your time than you spending 6 hours of your time doing it yourself.
Is there
Making up those numbers, but something like
No,
that.
I totally get you. And it resonates, and it reminds me of something I think I heard you say in a different podcast or something you wrote, where you might have had an executive who couldn't figure out a way to do a priority because he was so overwhelmed. And you're like, well, why don't you take a sick day? Why don't you take a sick day to do the priority? And so
Yeah.
how do you come up with these insights? Do you have a framework you're using when people come to you with problems that help you figure out what is their priority? What is the choice they should be leaning into?
I don't know if I have I have a lot of frameworks, I guess I would say. It's like, I don't have a single framework that I'm like, this is the one way we do things, because every situation is different. Every person is different. I have a lot of principles I try to apply, but like in that case, the idea was, look, if you were out sick, the team would figure out how to get by without you for a day. They'd be fine. So take a sick day and do this thing that you've been putting off for 4 months that you are telling me is the most important strategic thing at the company that's going to set the future direction of the company, but you don't have time to do it because you're responding to Slack? No. I like, that's unacceptable.
It's an expensive Slack
So you
line.
need to take-
That's a very expensive
Yeah, I
message.
know. Yeah, I was like, this is unacceptable. Like, no, you cannot think that way. And I'm kind of picking a little bit on this one guy, but it's this. You would be surprised how many people are like that. Like, oh, I don't want to be the blocker for other people. I have to be available, because what if they get stuck because I'm not there? Like, then they get stuck and they'll figure it out, or they'll wait till you're back. But if you can go get some incredibly valuable strategic work done with that time, that's going to be more valuable to the company than responding quickly. But it's hard to think that way. And I get it. It is really hard to think that way, because maybe you go out for 2 hours, think about the strategy, you come back with nothing. It's not measurable. There's no concrete action. There's no concrete sign of progress. Whereas if like you're there and you're busy and you're answered 15 messages in that time, you can feel so much better about yourself. Oh, I did something today. And I think that's part of the shift as well that I talk to a lot of my clients about, is letting go of that dopamine rush of doing things so they can actually think about, where do we go?
Yeah.
So on that point, like, that's something I've been thinking a lot about. It's like, direction matters far more than effort as a leader. You can put a lot of effort in going the wrong way, and that's wasted effort. Doesn't matter how hard you work if you go in the wrong direction.
Yeah, that's something
So as a leader,
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm just excited because that's something I've been really interested about lately too, is how do you choose the right direction, especially as you move up? So many options become available to you, and most of them you can't measure the costs. You can't measure the upside either. There's risks, there's trade-offs. And I'm curious, from your own life, you bet on yourself. You did something most people never would ever dream of. You got to Google, you got a prestigious job, and then you bet on yourself and started being an executive coach, which when you started was a lot less popular than it is today. And it's not that popular even today. It's still pretty unknown. How did you choose that goal for yourself, and how do you make sure how are you confident that was the right direction for you?
Well, I guess there's two parts to that. Like, I didn't know it was the right goal for me. It was something that was an interesting idea when I first started considering it 10 years ago. I was like, I was ready for something new. I didn't know what. And the the specific story here is I was at this like retreat talking to some other people, and I was complaining about my chief of staff job, and they said they're not measuring me on the right things. And the person I was talking to said, "What are the right things? How do you want to be measured?" I'm like, "Oh man, I have no idea how to answer that question."
That's a good question then. That's the right question. Yeah.
I was like, "Oh, well, I have to go like reflect for like a few months here to figure that out." And so I did, and I started thinking about like, how do I want to measure my life? What does success mean for me? What is a life well lived? And I kept coming back to this idea that helping people reach their potential, helping people get unstuck and find their way forward. That was the thing that really energized me. It motivated me. I was excited about it. And my friend was like, that's called coaching, dude. You should go check out coaching. I'm like, that's a thing? You can just go do that? They're like, just go check it out. And most people think like, oh man, then you must have just quit your job and become a coach immediately. No, I'm not that kind of person. I'm very conservative. I mean, I have a really good job at Google. Why would I give that up? So that started a 3-year process to check out, is this the right fit for me? I started off by doing it for free. Reach out to people I knew. I'm like, hey, does anyone want some free mentoring and coaching? Does everyone want to talk to me? A bunch of people said yes. And I would talk to them. I would help them. And they're like, man, this is so helpful. I'm like, I like doing it, and they like hearing from me. Okay, good. That's a good start. Then I went and interviewed a bunch of professional coaches. Like, what does it mean? How do you get started? Like, how does this work? And they all gave me some insights. And they said, even if you're a natural at this, you should still go get into a training program because that'll give you this formal framework to fall back on. Like, that seems to make sense. Okay, I'll buy that. And so first I did like a little, weekend workshop, a 2-day workshop. I'm like, oh, that was fun. And then after that, I signed up for the year-long workshop. Still working at Google at this point. In fact, I got Google to pay for the coaching, the training. So I'm doing that on nights and weekends while doing my day job. It's a lot of work, but I'm like, I really want to do it. And I'm learning a lot, and I'm loving it. I'm going deeper into coaching. And as part of the program, I'm starting to coach some actual clients and still loving it, still helping people, still feeling like I want to do more of it. So I get through the program. I'm now certified as a coach. And I'm still like not ready to quit my job because just because I like it doesn't mean it's a business. A business is something where people will pay me to do this.
Yeah. Especially if you're leaving the cushy Google job, right? So
exactly. It's very important to find out. Like there's this book, So Good They Can't Ignore You by Cal Newport. He's like, yeah, following your passion is idiotic. You can be passionate about stuff and be terrible at it. He gives the example of somebody that's like passionate about yoga. They take out all their savings. They open a yoga studio and they go bankrupt in 6 months because they're not actually good at teaching yoga.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't want that to be me. Not going to do that. So I started coaching business on the side. Got people to pay me. And once I had enough clients that was starting to interfere with my day job, that's when I took the leap and said, okay, now I'm ready to go for it. And even then I was like, and I'm going to put away this, 18 months of savings just to be safe. And if I get through a year and that money is not good, if I'm not making enough money by that point, then I have 6 months to go find a job. And honestly, the real thing that was helpful here was realizing it's not a one-way door. I'd worked at Google for 10 years at that point. I had a lot of contacts. I had a lot of people that trusted me. If I came back in a year begging for a job, somebody would have given me something. Like my backup plan was a job at Google. And when you think about things that way, like again, what's my worst case scenario? That's my worst case scenario is probably getting a job at Google. At that point, there's no risk. Like it's just not that big a deal. Just like when I burned out, my worst case scenario is like I get fired and I actually get to relax and recover. That doesn't sound so bad. So like actually thinking through the worst case scenarios and going like, wait, can I live with that? If I can live with that, what's the risk? Or can I reverse the decision? Like in that case, like I could leave Google and I could come back in a year. I think I even checked it out. There was like this policy at that point where if you wanted to come back 364 days after your resignation date, they would take you back. without interviews. So I was like, okay, I've got 364 days to figure out if this is going to work for me.
That's hilarious. I didn't know about
So,
that. That's hilarious.
you know, I don't know if that's still true. They probably got rid of that at some point, but it was just like, so it looks very courageous and brave from the outside, but I'd taken all these steps to build trust that this was a good direction for me. And that's something I really cover in the book is like, I'm not saying you change your life based on one epiphany. I'm saying you start running experiments, small, safe, tiny experiments, 30 minutes a week to try something different, to explore the possibilities, to see what's out there that's not what you're already doing. And if you keep doing those experiments, you will find directions that work for you. I guarantee it. Because you're trying stuff, you're learning. So that's what I really want people to get the hang of. It's like, you don't have to know the right direction. Nobody does. But you got to pick a direction and start trying things and see if that direction works for you. Sorry, one more analogy I'll throw in here.
Go.
I used to hate dating. I was hopelessly single for most of my life. And long story about therapy and blah, blah, blah. But eventually I realized the problem was I was going into every first date with the question, is this the right person for me? Is this my soulmate? Is this the person I want to spend the rest of my life with? Is this the right person for me? That's an impossible question to answer on a first date. And it was incredibly stressful and anxiety producing. And eventually I realized the only question I had to answer on the first date was, do I want to go on another date with this person? And at the next date, I just have to answer, do I want to go on yet one more date? That's all I have to answer. Do I take the next step? So to answer your question, like, how do I know it's the right direction? You don't have to know. You just have to be confident enough to take one more step in that direction. If you decide it's not the right direction, you go a different direction. That's it. It's not as all or nothing as we make it out to be.
Wow. Yeah. I love that idea of experiments and not taking it so seriously. I think everyone there's so many books saying, find your why, find your calling in life. And yours is really flips that on its head and says, why don't you just try something new? And if you just keep liking it, just keep going that direction. And that might be the right way, right? Am I getting that right?
Absolutely. That's what I'm saying. It's like, try something because where you are isn't working for you. By the way, this is only if it's not working for you. Like, the very first line of my book is, how do you feel about your life? If you love it, this book isn't for you. Keep doing what you're doing because it's working. But if your life is not what you want it to be, don't keep doing the same thing because it's not giving you the results you want. Try something different. That's like, if I sum up the book in like 2 sentences, that's it. If it's not working for you, try something different.
Yeah, but that takes it's funny. It sounds so simple, but then for people to even recognize that they're in that rut is a huge leap for a lot of people. And so I'm really curious. I can't get rid of this question in my head about you and your story. In that moment when you turned in your resignation for Google, even though you had done all those experiments and you knew it was a good path for you, was there any fear, any doubt?
There was not at that moment, but until like a month beforehand. But there were 2 things that solidified it for me. One was I had to get my wife to agree.
Important. That's very important, Eric.
So yeah, we were just getting married. Our first kid was on the way. And I'm like, so I know this is crazy because we have a kid on the way, but I'm thinking about leaving Google and doing this coaching thing. And I know I can't do it because I have to provide for the family and we need stability. And she was like, no, you should do it. I'm like, I'm sorry, what? She's like, of course you should do it. I'm like, that was not the answer I expected. And she's, well, first of all, it helps that my wife is an engineer at Apple. So we were going to have one big stable job in the family. But her point was, look, I see you on the days that you do your Google job and you come home exhausted and beaten up and tired and drained. And I see you on the days when you do even one coaching call and you're full of life and energized and excited and passionate. And that's the man I want to be with. I was like, okay, well, that's far more support than I expected. So yes. And even then I was still doubting it. I'm like, man, is it irresponsible for me? Got a new kid. I've got, this great job. Like, how can I walk away from it? And I had a coach of my own at the time, and she asked me, like, is this the example you want to set for your son? That you should stick with a job that you hate, that is draining your life for the sake of the money? Is money that important? I was like, damn. It's like, that's a tough question. But as soon as she asked it, I knew what the answer was. Like, oh, okay, no, I'm pretty clear. This is something I have to at least try. If I try it and I fail, at least I'll know. But I got to at least try it. And 6 years later, I'm still trying it and still haven't failed. And just got to keep trying one day at a time, 1 month at a time. So that's where I am.
I just had someone on. I love what he said. He said, just keep failing until you fail at failing, and you'll be all right.
It's pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you get over the fear of failure, it's huge. It makes such a difference. You're not scared. If you're not scared of failing, and I say that like it's easy. I'm still scared of failing. I'm still scared of looking like a fool. But it's something that I think it's so important. In my family, with my kids, we have this family motto now. Like, if you fall down, my kids will yell out, "Get back up!"
Oh, that's awesome. That's so cool.
And we do biking, we do skiing, we do all sorts of activities. And they're like, my daughter, we were on a ski slope just over the weekend, and she took a bad fall. She's like sliding headfirst down the hill for like 20 feet before I was able to catch her and pick her up. And she's freaked out. It takes her a little while to calm down. And then I said, what do we do if we fall? She's like, get back up. They took off down the slope again. I'm like, okay, I'm doing something right.
That's being a good parent right there. You've really drilled that in. And I've heard of that. Parents talking about getting their families together at a table, and the exercise of every night being, hey, did you fail at something today? And if you didn't, then you didn't try hard enough. You didn't try something new. We want to fail. And I mean, that's really cool, Eric.
Yeah, I haven't gone that far yet. That feels a little too vulnerable to me, but maybe that's something I should try with my kids. Maybe not every day, but once a week. Like, hey, what's your biggest failure of the week? Let's all share.
Yeah, weekly but daily sounds a little intense. It's like, crap, I gotta fail again today? This is brutal, man. Again, can I have a day off?
Yeah, let's start. I'm gonna start a little easier than that for me.
Well, I think what's so interesting about what you're saying and what resonates so much with me, and I'm glad you shared, is the wrestling with doubt. Even though you knew the worst case scenario was you're gonna get your job back, you knew you had some financial security, you had a backup job. But it was still tough to make that decision. You still struggle with doubt until you envisioned a future for yourself where you are role modeling your behavior for your son. And that's something I've noticed, coming from being homeless at one time and having no family to where I am now. I find it's harder to make decisions when you've actually have something than when you have nothing. When I had nothing, it wasn't so bad. It's like, oh, someone took my $5. I can't buy a sandwich. Well, life's screwed anyways. All right, buddy, let's go. It's fine. I'll go get a beer instead. But when you have something, when you have the money, when you have the prestige, maybe it's an ego issue, it's really tough to let it go for potential, right? That's the potential of something new, especially as we get older. And so,
yeah, I mean, that's just human nature, though. I mean, what's his name? Daniel Kahneman talks about the loss aversion. Like, losing something that we have feels like twice as bad as gaining something that we don't have. Like, that is how we are wired as humans. And so when you have something and you think about giving it up or losing it, like, it feels bad. That's how it feels. And it's a cognitive bias. And if you know it, you can adjust for it and compensate for it and do that. But yeah, it's hard to give up something when you know what you have. It's like the bird in the hand is worth two in the bush kind of thing. It's just, we like certainty, and it's hard to overcome that. But sometimes what you get on the other side is even better.
Yeah, and
you won't find out unless you try.
Yeah, that is smart micro experimenting, right? We got to do those experiments to try. I'm curious too.
Yeah.
It's easy to overlook the aspect of going from an employee mindset to a owner mindset. They're very different things. You show up to work, you get your paycheck. You're not hunting for your food every day. There's a lot of other aspects you have to running a business. How did you go about changing your mindset over time?
I guess I maybe I guess I never really had a good employee mindset. I mean, I had it to some extent, but my first many jobs were at small startups where it's like we had to work to make the company succeed together. And we all had to take ownership of the results because the company wouldn't succeed if we didn't work together. And so that's kind of how the first 10 years of my career was thinking in that way. And then I joined Google, and then it's like, oh, I'm part of this big machine that's going to succeed no matter what I do. But I was still thinking that way. I would be like, no, we got to do this. And people are like, that's not your job. I'm like, yeah, but like it's the right thing to do for the company. So let's figure out how to do it. And people looked at me like I was like, what are you doing? I still remember I had this my first or second year, probably my first year at Google. I was arguing with this other department in finance, and I'm like, "Hey, we need your help on this thing. It's a company priority. It's really gonna change things." And they're like, "No, I'm not gonna help you." I'm like, "What do you mean?" Like, well, it's not on my OKRs. If it was important, it would be on my OKRs. I'm like, "It came up last week." Well, if it was really important, my VP would change my OKRs. It was-
Been there, man.
and it was
Been
just
there.
like, how like are you kidding me? Like, how will I convince you that this is important? Like, show some initiative, man. And they're like, they were just stuck on like, no, I'm evaluated based on like how I do against my OKRs, and there's nothing you can say that will change that. And I was like, I do not know how to talk to you. So like that other person had the employee mindset. Like, I do what I'm told, and that's it. No initiative whatsoever. And that just never sat well with me. I'm always like, well, no, but what's the right thing to do? How do we make the right thing happen for the company? And so to answer your question, I think I always had a bit of that owner mindset, even when I was also being a people pleaser and trying to make my manager happy. Um, and so it wasn't that big of a shift for me. Learning how to do sales and marketing, that's something I'm still struggling with, but that's constant experimentation and honestly learning to copy what works from other people.
Yeah. Okay, that's fascinating. I think that's helpful to understand that you can take that owner mindset without being the owner yet, right? For everyone who's listening, you can take that ownership mindset and that'll carry over. It sounds like it carried over for you.
Oh, absolutely. No, I mean, this is what it means to get to an executive level, whether you're at a big company or a small company, is you start to take ownership of the results. Like, it's as an employee, it's like my job is do what I'm told. If I deliver on my tasks, I check things off the list, then I'm successful. But the company, being an executive at a company means the company has to succeed. The company results are what matter. And it doesn't matter if you did if you put in all the work and the results aren't there. Again, effort is not the metric of success. Working hard is not enough. You have to work hard on the right things that have an impact. You have to do what's important. You have to prioritize. And you have to set the direction, as we were talking about before. So you can practice that as an employee, because if you start thinking that way, people are going to give you more to do. I guarantee it, because you're helping them succeed. You're delivering results. And to your point about the person that said, like, just keep failing. Like, if what you're doing isn't working to get the results, try something else. Keep trying things. Keep experimenting, learning from your mistakes, trying different things. And when you can deliver results on command, that is a skill that will get you promoted. Or you'll just take off and do your own thing, which is also great.
Yeah, it seems to be working for you. Okay, I'm going to pull apart on this thread one more time. I'm curious. You mentioned earlier how you almost fell in love with coaching, if I'm saying it the right way. Like your wife noticed that you were happier the days you coached rather than when you were at Google. So many people I've met have that love affair with something when they first experiencing it, and then 5 years in, they doubt themselves. How's that going for you today? Are you as passionate as you were before, even more passionate, or are you finding new ways to explore a deeper relationship with coaching?
I am at least as maybe more passionate than I was 5 years ago. Like, I had just last Thursday, I had like 2 coaching calls and 2 intro chats. And I was just like, life is good. Like, I did good work today. Like, there's a quote from David White, who's a poet who also sometimes coaches. It's like, it's something like good work done well for the right reasons with an end in mind. End in mind. And I heard that once on a podcast with him, and I'm like, that's success. I did good work today. I did it well. I did it for the right reasons. I did it for a good purpose. Like, that's it. And like, coaching still fills that for me. I could do it. I do it well. I do it to help people. And I get paid to do it. It's like, well, okay, I am very lucky to have found that intersection for me between things people need and will pay for and things I'm good at. And that's what makes for a good business and things I love. Like that. So not only am I good at it, I love doing it. Like, so valuable, I love doing it and I'm good at it. Like that's the intersection where if you can find that, you're gonna have a pretty good working life.
Well, yeah, that juxtaposition from you working 100 hours, really killing yourself, quite literally killing yourself for a high prestige job versus now you are helping people directly. It seems like you just even mentioning it, I could see it on your face, how much more passionate you are and how more meaningful it is to you nowadays.
Absolutely. And I want to be clear, like I make a fraction of the money I used to make at Google. I am not killing it from a revenue perspective, but I make enough. And I think that's something that's easy to forget in America. It's like, there is such a thing as enough. You don't always have to earn more. And yeah, if I'd stayed at Google, I'd be making a lot more money now. I'd probably be a director. I'd probably be making a lot more money, but I don't think I'd be happy. And that was the choice I made. You have a choice. And I would choose control of my time, being able to be present with my kids, feeling good about the work I do each day. That's what I chose over the money. And, I could put a number on it. I know exactly how much money I gave up. And for me, that was the right choice. And again, like I have a lot of privilege going on here. Like I had 10 years at Google. I had the savings where I could afford to do this. I have a wife that works at Apple. I got a lot of tailwinds in my direction that let me make that choice pretty easily. Other people don't have those tailwinds, and it's a lot harder. So like, I'm not saying like it's happily ever after for everybody that tries this route. I know a bunch of people who try coaching, who love coaching. They try it. They can't make the financials work, and they have to go find something else to do. And that's okay too. Like we do the best we can with the cards that we have. But again, I just ask people to try something different if what you're doing isn't working for you.
Yeah. And well, I think what's so powerful there is your values driven approach where if there is something more important to you, and I met enough people in my life where they work the 100-hour weeks and they still want to do more. That promotion and that pay is the most important thing to them. That's their center value. That's okay. No judgment.
Yep.
That's your thing. Go for it. But if you want something more balanced, I do feel as a society, we put money on a pedestal, even when we might have different values personally. And that's what I think. It takes courage.
Yeah.
That's a courageous thing to do. Not a lot of people would look at taking a pay cut and a prestige cut and all of that. Like talking to your parents. I imagine telling your dad or telling your mom, hey, by the way, I'm going to quit Google and do coaching. There's a social stigma, I guess I'm saying. And so I want to encourage everyone that's okay. That's okay to lean into things that might be social stigmas because maybe society's wrong, right? Maybe there's a better way to live.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess what I'll say there is like, who are the stakeholders that matter to you? Because I think that was a mistake I made in my life up until the time I burned out was I treated everyone's opinion as equally important. I had to keep everybody happy. And that's just not sustainable because you're going to be twisted into knots and torn in different directions. There's this saying that you're the average of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. And what I take that away from that is like, yeah, these are the people that are going to affect your decisions. So surround yourself with people that align with your values, that are the kind of people whose life you want to have. And so, like, yeah, I was on the track to get promoted to director at Google, and I could see all the directors, and they were unhappy and kind of miserable and working too hard. And just like, I don't want that job. Like, they're like, this is what you need to do to get promoted. I'm like, yeah, I don't want that promotion. That looks miserable. And And my manager was so confused. She's like, "What do you mean you don't want the promotion?" I'm like, "Yeah, no, that's not what I want with my life." They're like, and it was alien to her because her whole life had driven by getting the next promotion. And for me to say no, it's like, you are not operating by the playbook here. And I was like, yeah, I'm not. And that's okay. Because by that point, I had other role models in my life, people who were coaches, who had gone this independent route, and who I was like, I want to be more like that. That's what I want my life to be like. So I guess, yeah, it was courageous, but it was also just kind of looking at my options and saying like, these are the role models I want to emulate, and these are the people who's are my anti-role models. This is what I want to avoid. And yeah, I think that's something that's really important. That's in some sense how you find your values. You find the people that you respect, and you follow them, and you use them as models of what you could do.
Yeah, well, yeah, iterating, and making new goals around a structure of a value-based decisions, around your connections that ultimately drive your purpose and calling. That seems like that. I can't find a better way to articulate how people should approach their lives, but you need that reflection first of having that moment, that oh crap moment. I see the next rung doesn't look better than what I have. And that's a big deal because you had to be in a situation where that extra $200K a year, that didn't mean as much to you as your family. And that's an important, that's a tough reflection to have, because especially for as you move up, everyone else starts spending more money too. And your friends have those values, cars get nicer, houses get nicer. So what would you, have you ever, I know we got to land the plane. I know I want to respect your time. One more question and then some fire drill questions. How do you manage this with the executives you're working with, between what I might say the softer side, the perceptual side of we need to work on some values here? It sounds like you might be chasing something that's not really what you want, versus behavioral. Here, I've been a consultant before, and I know you're doing something wrong here. Like you're not acting like a leader. You need to delegate. How do you walk that line, or what do you focus on as a coach?
So I guess what I focus on is their own behavior. And the reason I do that is because that's the one thing we control. Like, you can't control other people. The one thing you can change is how do you show up in a situation? And I mean, nobody comes to me because they're like happy and doing great. Because if they're happy and doing great, they wouldn't hire a coach. So there's something going on that made them think, you know what, I could use a coach. And I guess the first thing I do, I don't like say, let's talk about your values. I basically hold up a mirror to them. I'm like, this is your life. And this is and I see how tired you are, how exhausted you are, how drained you are. And they're like, yeah, I really don't like it. I don't want to live this way anymore. Great. I mean, not great, but like great in the sense that that means you're ready for a change. Okay, here's an experiment you can try this week of something different. And it's going to be like one small thing you can do differently in a meeting. Let's try that. See what happens. And it could be like, we're going to block off 30 minutes in the morning to think about, or not even 30 minutes, take 5 minutes as you're drinking your coffee or brushing your teeth in the morning to think about like, what's the one thing I want to get done today? What's one thing that's important I'm going to move forward? What's my priority for the day? Like that's a very simple exercise to give to a lot of people, because that focuses them. They're like, okay, if I move one thing forward a day, that turns into real progress. That's like progress every day. And they start to realize they can have impact if they focus, if they choose to say yes to something so they can say no to other things. Because that's the hard part for a lot of these people. They don't know how to say no. So it's like, okay, but if you're not saying no, if you're saying, no, I have this other thing that's more important. Another typical example for a lot of my clients is I say you're not allowed to say yes to any commitment in the moment. So they get asked to do something, like before you say, yeah, I can do that, you say, let me write that down, check my other commitments, I'll get back to you later today. Just have them do that. And then when they actually do that, they get to the end of the day, they look at all the things they've been asked to do. It's like a list of 12 things that would take 3 days to do. If they say yes to all of them, like the math doesn't work. You can't do 3 days of work every day. And that's why they're so burned out and so exhausted. So it's like, just by forcing them to not say yes in the moment, they can actually look at the list at the end and go like, oh crap, I can't say yes to everything. What am I going to say yes to? So those are a couple like very tactical consulting style things. And then from there, I will be paying attention to the things that energize them and drain them. And just, again, reflect it back to them. Hold up a mirror saying like, this is what I'm seeing. Does that resonate? Let's look for opportunities to do more of those things that energize you, the things that have impact, the things that have meaning. And then we kind of iterate our way to a values-based approach, even though I wouldn't call it that.
Well, I like it. It's existentialist, right? So you're looking at how the behaviors actually reflect their values rather than what they say about their values. And you're mirroring that like a scientist, right? You're observing them and, hey, did you know that you did this? This was what you chose? Did you know that you actually chose to say yes to this other than this other thing? That's cool. I've never heard of that, Eric. That's a really cool and unique way to approach it. I think that's very valuable.
I mean, I studied physics in school. I trained as an experimental physicist, so I do take a scientist approach, and experiments is in my DNA in some sense. So like, yeah, that's how I frame it. And I work with a lot of tech people that are very data driven and science driven and engineering driven. I'm like, if I say like, try this practice, they're like, I don't do that. Like, if I say try this experiment, they're like, okay, fine. I got to try the experiment to see what happens.
Oh yeah, speaking their language. That's great. Well, I want to respect your time.
Absolutely.
I know you got to log off in a few minutes. Quick fire round of questions. And before I do that,
Sure.
Thank you so much for coming on. This is a lot of fun, and I hope we can do it again. I'm going to read your book. He just keeps getting delayed, but I'm going to read it, and I would like to talk about it more in detail sometime if you have time. It was really fun talking to you. So some fun questions. First, favorite dessert?
Favorite dessert? Snickerdoodles.
Nice.
Cookies.
Nice. Cookies are good. What book are you reading right now?
What book am I reading right now? I just bought 2 books by April Dunford, a book on product positioning and a book called Sales Pitch. I've tried to study sales marketing. So
Okay.
I just started reading them last night, so I have no idea how good they are, but I've heard her talk on a podcast and she's great. So hoping that I'll learn from her books.
Let me know. What's a leadership book that you've read more than 2 times? Something that you go back to.
Ooh, that's a good question. Huh. I don't know if I have one I've read multiple times because I typically take really good notes. So I don't have to go back to them and reread them. I guess I know I've read Man's Search for Meaning a bunch of times, like several times, and that's not a leadership book, but that is a book about purpose and meaning and how we create our own reality by choosing what we pay attention to. For those that don't know, it's not a story. It's the account of a Holocaust survivor and his time in the concentration camps. And even in those conditions, he had a choice of how to interpret what was happening to him and what he was going to live for. And so I find it very inspiring, even if it's a bit dark in terms of topics covered.
I'm reading that right now. It's Viktor Frankl, right? Yeah. Excellent book. What is one piece of advice that you hear it and you wish people would stop giving it as advice? Just bad generic advice.
Ooh. Let me think about that one. Oh man, I'm totally blanking.
It's okay. We can skip it if you want, man.
Just give me a second. I guess it's something. I don't know. It's not necessarily generic advice, but it's something like stop. I guess my inversion of it is like stop searching for the right thing to do. You're like when you were before saying like, yeah, but how do I know if it's the right thing? Like this whole concept of there is a right answer. That is terrible advice. That's I guess what I would say. It's like life is more complex than that. There's no one right answer. There's no one right way to do things. You asked me before if I have a framework that I use for everybody. I'm like, no, because there's not one right framework. There's just a bunch of frameworks. There's a bunch of answers. We get to choose what's right for us. So I guess maybe that's the idea. The generic advice is like, climb the ladder, do the right thing, figure out. It's like, there is no ladder. Choose what's right for you.
That's awesome. And that's something I'm taking away from our conversation, by the way, is the value of action over thinking. Like there's so many tools to overthink things, but you can't really understand yourself and properly reflect until you act and make a decision. That is powerful. So with that in mind, last piece.
Wait.
Okay. Sorry. Yeah, I'm just going to bulldoze you. Go ahead. Go. You can't let it hang, huh?
No, like, because I was fortunate that, like, so back in the day, like I said, I was a physics major. I was in a PhD program, and I wasn't happy. I was not doing well, but I didn't know what else to do with my life, because I spent my whole life to that point. Like, I was going to get a physics PhD, go be a college professor, try to win a Nobel Prize. Like, that was the whole plan for my life from the time I was like 10 years old. And so, now like in my 20s, I'm like, crap, I don't know what to do with myself, because like that's all I've ever thought I was going to do. And I was talking to a friend and saying like, well, maybe I should like spend 3 months thinking about what I should do with my life and really analyze it and figure out a plan. And he looked at me and was like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. The only way to figure out what you want to do is to do things. So just go try some stuff, and that's how you'll figure out what you want to do. And I was thankful to have gotten that advice, because that has formed the basis of everything I've done since then. He was basically saying, experiment, try things, see what works for you, and keep navigating to do more of the things that work for you and less of the things that don't. And that's kind of what my career has been. So yeah, action, overthinking, absolutely 100% agree. That's a great message. I want people to take away from this.
Well, you took the air out of my sails again. My last question was going to be, give me your top advice in 30 seconds. And I think you did it for me before. So unless you got another nugget of wisdom in there.
I guess the other thing I'll add, just because I can't resist adding things, is you can't do it all. And this is something that people just really don't want to believe. They're like, no, I can be great at work, and I can be a great partner, and I can be a great parent, and I can run triathlons in my free time. I'm going to do it all. I'm going to have a side business too. And it's like, no, like, I'm sorry, you can't do it all and do it well. Because if somebody picks one of those, says, I'm just going to focus on work, I'm sorry, they're going to do better than you. It's their attention is not split. Their energy is not split. And that's okay. But don't delude yourself to thinking that 50% of your attention is better than somebody else's 100% attention. Choose what you want to spend your time and energy and attention on, and live with the choice. Own that choice. Say, that's what I choose right now. Right now, am I as successful a coach as I would be if I didn't have kids? No, of course not. I'm distracted constantly. And that's okay. That's what I choose to do with myself. That is a choice. Like, I'm going to own that choice. But yeah, like sometimes I look at other coaches and all they do is coaching. I'm like, I'm jealous of them. That's the way it is. Like, I can't do it all. So that's kind of it. Yeah. I mean, that kind of ties together all these things. Like, if you can't do it all, then you have to make a choice. Then you have to choose, what action am I going to take, versus like trying to think through, well, how do I do it all? Like, no, just let that go and pick something and start doing it. Try an experiment, move forward, and learn. That's what I ask you to do.
That's awesome. That's a great place to close. I'll stop recording there. Thank you so much, Eric.